Rory McIlroy just gave the PGA Tour's new CEO a 24-hour ultimatum. Fix the two-track schedule, fix the broken playoffs, and give players real power over their own careers, or watch the tour fall apart. It happened at a summit that was supposed to be a calm peace talk between leadership and players. Brian Rolapp, the CEO everyone said would save the tour, walked in expecting handshakes. Instead, Rory stood up and put him on the spot in front of the entire room. And the players who spent 4 years fighting each other over the LIV split, they all lined up behind Rory. One speech changed the mood of the whole sport. So what exactly did Rory demand? How badly did Rolapp struggle to respond? And why are LIV players enjoying every second of this? Stick around because we're breaking down all of it. And subscribe now because this story just blew up and it's only getting started. Before we get to the ultimatum, you need to understand the mood in that room. This summit was supposed to be about peace, leadership and players sitting down like adults and slowly fixing the mess the tour has become. That was the promise. Reality had other plans. Rolapp has spent his first stretch on the job talking like a corporate boardroom while the players quietly lost their patience. 47 events, 230 players, a better and more competitive product. That's his pitch, and he repeats it constantly. He came in fresh from the business side of pro sports, promising something smoother and smarter. Good pitch. Actually delivering it has been a lot harder. Every time he opens his mouth, it sounds like a slide from a quarterly earnings call, not a man who understands what these players actually live through week to week. Meanwhile, the players keep staring at a schedule split into 2 tiers, wondering when anyone planned to ask for their opinion. Signature events sit on one side for a chosen few. Everything else gets pushed down to a lower level. Tournaments that fans have loved for years were suddenly labeled second class. Imagine working your whole life to reach the top, only to be told your favorite event is now the junior version. That's a serious problem waiting to explode. And Rolapp kept walking right past it, then acted surprised when it caught fire. Here's the other half of the story. The schedule fight isn't the only issue. Remember the 3M Open a few weeks back? 11 players boycotted that tournament over a surprise rule change that veteran Jim Furyk said he'd never even heard about. Picture a guy who's played on tour for decades getting blindsided by a new rule about practicing on the green he just finished. No warning, no conversation. The memo just showed up out of nowhere. Officials said everything was under control. That's usually the phrase people use right before things fall apart. Trust between the players and the people running the sport has been fading one strange decision at a time. And once trust goes, it doesn't come back with a friendly email. Watching all of it pile up, Rory clearly decided somebody with real standing had to speak up before the whole thing collapsed. And it wasn't just the 3M mess. Small things kept adding up. Rulings that seemed to change from week to week. Announcements that hit the news before the players even heard about them. Decisions made behind closed doors and then handed down like there was nothing to discuss. On their own, each one is a small annoyance. Stacked together over months, they turn into a message. And that message is simple. Your opinion doesn't matter here. That's the feeling Rory walked into the summit carrying, and it's the feeling the whole room shared, whether they admitted it out loud or not. So Rolapp walks into the summit sure he owns the room, his agenda, his timeline, his 2028 vision. He's the CEO, and CEOs are used to people nodding along. Then Rory McIlroy stood up. You have to understand what Rory means in that moment. 6-time major champion. The face who stayed loyal while half the locker room flew to Saudi Arabia. The same man who defended this tour on camera until he was tired of defending it. That kind of loyalty earns you the right to be heard without anyone cutting you off. When someone with that record tells you the house is on fire, you don't hand him a safety pamphlet and move on. McIlroy never raised his voice. Calm and clear, he laid out his demands one at a time. First, scrap the 2-track system before it splits the sport into a permanent class system. Second, fix the FedEx Cup playoffs, a format almost nobody actually understands. Third, and this is the big one, give players real power over the decisions that shape their careers. Real power. he stressed. Not a polite seat at the table, not a box you tick before doing whatever you already decided in private. And there was a deadline attached. 24 hours to answer, not 24 weeks of committee meetings. You could feel the air leave the room. Executives who came in expecting a group hug were suddenly staring at a clock. Watch closely and you can tell this wasn't an angry rant. Rory walked in with a plan. He started soft, almost respectful, then tightened the pressure one issue at a time. The CEO nodded early on, probably thinking this was heading somewhere safe. It wasn't. By the time Rory reached the part about players being shut out of every real decision, the whole room had heated up. This is where it really took off. Players who had disagreed with McIlroy on almost everything for 4 straight years suddenly started nodding along. Arms unfolded, faces relaxed. Younger pros who only know the LIV wars from highlights leaned in like they were watching the best drama of the year. The split, arguing locker room that Rolapp had been managing one player at a time suddenly looked like a united group. One veteran, who asked to stay anonymous, said it was the first time in ages that someone said the quiet part out loud without first counting the political cost. Another player described it as someone finally turning the lights on in a room where everyone had been stumbling in the dark for years. These aren't small voices complaining from the back. These are veterans who know the difference between a real turning point and a passing tantrum, and they're saying this one counts. Word coming out of the summit described executives frozen in their chairs, and to their credit, nobody in leadership even tried to stop him. Rolapp reached for his usual script. 47 events, 230 players. More competitive, more interesting. The same corporate lines delivered on autopilot while the room burned around him. This time, it landed flat. Rory had already reframed the whole conversation, so those polished lines sounded like a man reading cue cards while the fire alarm went off above his head. Nobody was buying it anymore, and the longer he leaned on the same talking points, the smaller he looked, because you can't answer a demand for real change with a marketing slogan. And the players could see it. You could watch it land on their faces. Every time Rolapp repeated a number, somebody in the room shifted in their seat. These are people who read greens for a living. They notice when someone is stalling. They notice when an answer is really just a way of avoiding the question. And that's exactly what this felt like. A very expensive way of saying nothing at all. And speaking of decisions nobody bought, look at how the rule makers have handled things lately. Joaquin Niemann got a 2-stroke penalty for throwing a club at the U.S. Open, turning a bad hole into a disaster. Meanwhile, other stars cursed on camera and kicked their own equipment with no consequences at all. Fair? Not even close. Every pro noticed that double standard, and it fed the exact anger Rory was channeling in that room. When the punishment depends on who you are instead of what you did, players stop trusting the whole system. Governing bodies love making examples of the newer players while the established names skate by. Rules should apply to everyone, or they're not really rules. And then there's Lucas Glover, the sitting chairman of the Player Advisory Council, who walked around a green in his socks to protest a spike mark complaint. That's the kind of circus energy everyone is dealing with. When the people meant to represent the players are goofing around in their socks, you start to understand why a coalition felt overdue. Quick pause. If this breakdown is working for you, do me one small favor and hit that like button. It tells the algorithm to push this in front of every golf fan who needs to see it, and drop one word in the comments about how you feel about Rory's move. Just one word. Let them stack up. All right, back to it. Look past the fireworks and you can see what McIlroy actually changed. Divide and conquer has been Rolapp's whole plan since day one. Keep the players split. Handle them one at a time. Make Rory look like a lone wolf. Paint the boycotters as troublemakers. Make everyone else feel replaceable. That plan only works while the players stay scattered and quiet. Overnight, that scattered group found one loud, public voice right in front of every executive in the building. And here's the irony. The man half the tour once resented is now the man half the tour lines up behind. That's not a small minority leadership can wave off with a press release anymore. It's a coalition, a real one. And coalitions don't quietly break up just because a CEO wants them to. Once a united group forms around the same executive who spent months ignoring complaints, the ignoring is over. Leverage handed to a group of athletes rarely gets handed back. Ask any league that ever tried to take it back the hard way, because it almost always ends with the bosses losing more than they bargained for. And under all that passion was cold, careful strategy, which deserves real credit. Rory didn't just wander in and vent. Like a good lawyer stacking evidence, he built the case piece by piece. He opened with loyalty, which grabbed the moral high ground before anyone could argue. Then came the specifics, the two-track mess, the broken playoffs, the 3M boycott. Proof he wasn't just talking. And the closing line, "You are nothing without the players." By the time he sat down, Rolapp's tidy story had fallen apart. Now think about a contrast nobody in leadership wants to mention. While the executives and veterans fight over tiers and penalties, a 21-year-old rookie named Jackson Koivin just walked in and beat the best player in the world at that same 3M Open. Kids are out there winning tournaments while grown men argue about socks and spike marks. Write his name down, because that kid is the future, while the adults bicker over tee times. Ask any longtime caddy and they'll tell you the mood on tour has gone sour. The grumbling that used to happen quietly in the parking lot now happens loudly and on the record. Golf keeps producing magic on the course and chaos off it, and the gap between the two grows every week. Zoom out and it gets messier. The money broke first because love blew up the economics of the sport almost overnight. And guess who's enjoying every crack in the tour's foundation? Levy players grinning ear to ear. Every new headline is free advertising for the breakaway league. Greg Norman barely needs a recruiting budget when the tour keeps running his ads for him. Every player who feels ignored is a name on his wish list, and every rule change that lands badly is another reason for someone to pick up the phone. That's the part leadership seems to keep forgetting. Every unhappy player isn't just a problem to manage, he's a recruiting opportunity for the other side. The more the tour treats its stars like employees who should be grateful, the easier it gets for someone to whisper that they'd be respected somewhere else. Rory understands that math better than anyone, which is exactly why his warning carried so much weight. There's now an open fight between leadership and its own biggest stars. And the fans, the diehards who stand in the rain until the last putt drops, are watching this soap opera with equal parts anger and interest. You can't build a TV empire on athletes who feel powerless and disrespected. It has never worked anywhere in sports. This hands the players real leverage heading into the next round of talks. It puts every sponsor on notice that the talent might finally have power, and it sends a clear signal to LeV holdouts that the grass over here might be greener now. Few people in that room understand that better than Rory. Staying when leaving was easy and very profitable, gave him the loudest microphone in the game, and now he's using it for everyone, not just himself. So where does the tour go from here? Honestly, nobody knows, and anyone who says they do is selling something. Maybe Rolapp gives in and finally scraps the two-track system. Or maybe he stalls, waits out the news cycle, and hopes the coalition falls apart on its own. But this feels different because the players have seen what unity looks like now, and that's hard to unsee. Either way, something real changed in that room, and everyone in it felt it. Somebody in that building has a big decision to make, and the clock is ticking loud. The players finally found a backbone. Rory gave it to them, and it left Rolapp looking like a CEO with a fancy title, a printed schedule, and an empty locker room. And once players remember they have power, they don't tend to forget it. That's the real story here. Not one meeting or one deadline, but a shift in who actually holds the cards. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Rory's ultimatum actually changes anything, or does the tour take the hit and go right back to business as usual? Tell me in the comments, because I read every single one. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and share this with one golf buddy who needs to see it. Trust me, this saga is far from over. The next chapter is already being written, and we'll be right here to break it down. See you in the next one.